Every single day, millions of Americans open the refrigerator, pull out last night's dinner, and warm it up without a second thought. It feels responsible, it feels economical. It feels like the sensible thing to do. But there are 4 specific foods sitting in that refrigerator right now that, when you reheat them, undergo a chemical transformation inside the container before the food even reaches your plate. And that transformation has been linked to cellular damage that your body accumulates quietly, silently over years. I am not here to frighten you. I am here to explain what is actually happening, because nobody in a 10-minute appointment has ever sat you down and walked you through the chemistry of your own kitchen. I have spent more than 15 years working with patients, and I can tell you that some of the most consistent patterns I see in chronic inflammation, digestive disruption, and long-term cellular stress have nothing to do with exotic supplements or rare conditions. They trace back to ordinary habits like reheating food. The mechanism is not complicated once you understand it, and once you understand it, you cannot unsee it. That is exactly what I want for you today. Here is what we are going to do. I am going to walk you through 4 specific foods, explain precisely what happens to their chemistry when heat is applied a second time, and tell you exactly what to do instead. These are not obscure ingredients. They are foods you almost certainly have in your kitchen right now. Number 2 on this list is one that most people consider a health food, something they are proud of eating, and that makes it the most quietly dangerous one of all. Stay with me until we get there, because the reasoning behind it will change how you shop and how you store food for the rest of your life. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments how old you are and whether you tend to meal prep or cook fresh each day. I read those comments, and the habits and the age of this audience shapes exactly what I cover next. Now, before I name the 4 foods, I want to give you the mechanism, the underlying chemistry that makes reheating dangerous for specific foods and not others. Once you have this, everything else clicks into place. When you cook food for the first time, heat does 2 things. It makes the food safe by killing bacteria, and it breaks down the molecular structure of proteins, fats, and certain plant compounds into forms your body can absorb. That is normal. That is cooking. But when you take certain foods and apply heat a second time, you are not just warming them up. You are continuing a chemical reaction that has been running slowly in your refrigerator since the first cook. Proteins can denature further and form new compounds. Fats, particularly certain polyunsaturated fats, can oxidize when reheated, producing molecules called aldehydes and lipid peroxides. Nitrates in some vegetables convert into a family of compounds called nitrosamines under repeated heat. Starches in others can break down into forms that spike blood sugar far faster than the original food would have. Think of it this way. The first time you cook food, you are firing a kiln. The heat transforms the clay into something stable and useful. The second time you apply heat, you are not firing the kiln again. You are taking something that already went through that transformation and applying stress to a structure that was never designed to handle it twice. The result is chemical byproducts that your body then has to process, neutralize, and in some cases fail to eliminate. Your cells have repair mechanisms. But those mechanisms are not unlimited. When you flood the body repeatedly with oxidized fats, excess nitrosamines, or rapidly absorb degraded starches, you are asking those repair systems to work overtime, every day, year after year. That is what we mean when we talk about chronic cellular stress. Not a single catastrophic event, but a slow accumulation that shows up decades later as inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, and in some studies, elevated cancer risk. That is the mechanism. Keep it in mind, because you are going to see it show up again with every food on this list. The first food is rice. Rice is a staple in tens of millions of American households. It is affordable, it is versatile, and it is one of the most commonly reheated foods in existence. A pot of rice on Sunday becomes Monday's side dish and Tuesday's fried rice, and that feels like smart home economics. The problem begins not with the reheating itself, but with what happens to rice between the first cook and the second. Cooked rice that is allowed to cool, particularly at room temperature or even in the refrigerator over an extended period, develops what are called retrograded starches. The starch structure reorganizes, and while that part actually has some benefit for blood sugar in small amounts, the real danger with rice is microbial. Cooked rice is one of the leading sources of a bacteria called Bacillus cereus, which produces heat-resistant spores and, more critically, heat-resistant toxins. You can reheat that rice to a full boil and those toxins survive. The bacteria die. The toxins do not. But there is a second layer here that goes beyond food poisoning, and this is the part nobody talks about. When rice, already a high glycemic food, is reheated repeatedly, the starch structure degrades in a way that increases its glycemic impact. For someone managing blood sugar, and in my practice, that is the majority of patients over 60, reheating rice means a faster glucose spike than the original serving would have caused. Over time, repeated blood sugar spikes drive insulin resistance, which drives inflammation, which is the foundational chemistry underneath a very long list of chronic diseases. What to do instead? Cook rice fresh when you can. If you have leftover rice, cool it quickly by spreading it on a flat surface, refrigerate it within 1 hour of cooking, and only reheat it once, bringing it to a full rolling temperature throughout, not just warm on the outside and cool in the middle. Never leave cooked rice at room temperature for more than 2 hours. And if rice has been in the refrigerator for more than 1 day, the safer choice is to let it go. The second food is the one I promised you. It is spinach. I know what you are thinking. Spinach is a health food. It is on every list of cancer-fighting vegetables ever published. You are eating it to do the right thing, and you are right to eat it. Fresh spinach is genuinely one of the most nutrient-dense foods available to you. But reheated spinach is a different story, and this is one of the most consistent misunderstandings I encounter. Spinach is naturally high in nitrates. That is not a flaw. In the context of fresh or properly prepared spinach, nitrates are actually beneficial. They support blood vessel health and circulation. The problem arises when cooked spinach is reheated. During the first cook, some of those nitrates begin converting to nitrites. When you refrigerate cooked spinach and then apply heat again, the conversion continues, and under the right conditions of heat and acidity, nitrites can form a family of compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are among the most well-studied potentially carcinogenic compounds in the food supply. The research on nitrosamines and cancer risk has been ongoing for decades, with particular attention from the World Health Organization and the International Agency for Research on Cancer. The concern is not from a single serving. The concern is from the pattern of repeated exposure accumulated over months and years. For someone eating reheated spinach several times a week as part of what they believe is a healthy diet, that pattern is worth understanding. The mechanism tracks back to what I explained at the start. The first cook begins a chemical cascade. Refrigeration slows it, but does not stop it. The second application of heat accelerates it toward compounds your body's repair systems were not designed to handle in quantity. There is also a secondary issue with spinach specifically. Spinach is high in iron, and when it is reheated, particularly in a microwave, the iron can interact with heat in a way that promotes the formation of free radicals, reactive molecules that damage cell membranes and DNA over time. What to do instead? Eat spinach fresh in salads as often as possible. If you cook spinach, cook only what you will eat at that meal. If you have leftover cooked spinach, eat it cold the next day in a grain bowl or mixed into something that does not require reheating. Do not reheat cooked spinach. The nutrient loss is significant and the chemical risk is real. This is a good moment to pause because we are 2 foods in and you can already see the same pattern underneath both of them. The first cook starts a process. Refrigeration slows it, but does not erase it. The second application of heat pushes that process into territory that creates compounds your body struggles to manage. The next 2 foods are the ones that most directly affect long-term cellular health, and one of them is something almost every household in America reheats every week. I also want to take a moment here because if you are watching this and realizing that you have been doing some of these things for years, I want you to hear something directly. This is not about blame. The system we live in does not give you 15 minutes to explain the chemistry of your own kitchen. Your doctor is rushed, the appointment is short, and this kind of detail simply does not make the cut. The system makes money when you stay sick, not when you get well. That is economics, not malice. But it means the information does not reach you unless someone takes the time to give it. What you have already learned in this conversation, the nitrosamines in reheated spinach, the heat-resistant toxins in rice, the mechanism behind why the second application of heat is chemically different from the first, that is the kind of foundation that changes how you think about your kitchen permanently. And if you want to go deeper on this, I have put together something I am genuinely proud of. It is called the Complete Senior Health Vault. 3 full guides in plain English. The medications worth questioning, food is medicine with specifics you can actually use, and a manual for understanding your own body after 70. Everything I wish I had time to explain in the office in one place. You can find the link in the description below or scan the code on your screen right now. It is educational material, not a substitute for your doctor, but it is the full conversation your appointment never had time for. Now, number 3, and I want you to pay close attention to this one. The third food is chicken. Chicken is the most commonly eaten protein in the United States. It is lean, it is affordable, and leftover chicken feels like the cornerstone of smart meal planning. And in some contexts, that is true. But reheated chicken, particularly chicken that is reheated unevenly in a microwave, creates a specific set of problems that are worth understanding in detail. The first is structural. Chicken is a high protein food, and proteins are sensitive to heat in a way that fats and carbohydrates are not. The first time you cook chicken, you denature the proteins, meaning you unfold their molecular structure. The heat opens them up, which is what makes the meat tender and digestible. When you reheat chicken, you are applying that denaturing process to proteins that have already been through it once. The result is that the protein structure breaks down further into smaller fragments, and in the presence of heat, those fragments can form new compounds called heterocyclic amines, particularly when the surface of the chicken browns or chars. Heterocyclic amines are one of the most studied groups of potentially carcinogenic compounds formed during the cooking of meat. The National Cancer Institute has documented their formation extensively. The concern is that these compounds, when they enter the body, can interact with DNA in a way that promotes the kind of cellular mutations associated with cancer development over time. Again, we are talking about a pattern of repeated exposure, not a single meal. But for someone who reheats chicken several times a week across months and years, the accumulation is relevant. There is a second issue specific to how most people reheat chicken, which is unevenly. Microwaves heat food from the outside in and create hot spots and cold spots throughout the food. Chicken that feels hot on the outside and is warm, but not thoroughly heated on the inside, creates ideal conditions for bacterial survival. Campylobacter and Salmonella, two bacteria commonly associated with chicken, can survive in those cool interior zones even after what feels like adequate reheating. This is not a theoretical risk. It is one of the leading causes of foodborne illness in older adults whose immune systems are less equipped to contain those infections quickly. What to do instead? If you have leftover chicken, the safest and most nutritious option is to eat it cold, sliced into a salad, or over roasted vegetables. If you must reheat it, use an oven at a low temperature, around 300 degrees, covered with foil to retain moisture, and bring the interior to 165 degrees throughout. Never reheat chicken in a microwave if you can avoid it, and never reheat chicken more than once. The fourth food is eggs. This is the one that surprises people most, and it is the one where the mechanism is perhaps the most direct. Eggs cooked and then reheated undergo a specific protein transformation that is worth understanding clearly. When you cook an egg, the proteins in both the white and the yolk denature and set. The structure becomes firm and stable. When you reheat a cooked egg, especially at high temperatures, those already set proteins undergo what is called further denaturation and cross-linking. The texture changes, becomes rubbery, and you notice that. But what you do not notice is that the sulfur-containing amino acids in the egg white, particularly one called cysteine, can react during reheating to produce small amounts of hydrogen sulfide, which is the compound responsible for that faint sulfur smell in overcooked eggs. That part is mostly benign at low levels. The more significant issue is this. The yolk of a freshly cooked egg is one of the most bioavailable sources of choline, lutein, and zeaxanthin available to you. Choline is essential for brain function and liver health. Lutein and zeaxanthin are the primary protective compounds for your retina and your long-term vision. These are fragile molecules. They are heat sensitive. The first cook degrades a portion of them. The second cook degrades more. By the time you eat a reheated egg, the nutritional profile you were counting on has been significantly diminished, and you are consuming a protein whose structure has been altered twice. For older adults specifically, this matters more than it might at first seem. Choline deficiency has been linked to cognitive decline, fatty liver disease, and impaired memory consolidation. Lutein and zeaxanthin depletion has been linked in multiple studies, including work published in journals focused on ophthalmology and age-related disease, to accelerated macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of blindness in Americans over 60. If you are eating reheated eggs because you believe you are protecting your brain and your eyes, the data suggests the opposite may be true. What to do instead? Cook eggs fresh. Eggs are one of the fastest foods to prepare, and a fresh soft scrambled egg or a poached egg takes less than 4 minutes. If you do any form of meal prep that involves eggs, hard-boiled eggs kept in the shell and eaten cold are stable and do not require reheating. Never reheat scrambled eggs, fried eggs, or omelets. The nutritional cost is real, and the chemistry is not in your favor. Now let me tell you about someone I will call Margaret. Margaret was 71 years old when she first came to see me. She lived in Tucson, Arizona, was sharp as anyone I have ever met, and had been managing her blood sugar for about 8 years. She exercised. She watched her sodium. She was, by every measure she had been given, doing the right things. But her inflammatory markers were elevated. Her A1C was not responding the way it should have given her habits, and she had begun to notice that her energy in the afternoons was inconsistent in a way she could not explain. When I sat with Margaret and went through her actual daily routine, not just her food groups, but the specific mechanics of how she prepared and reheated her meals, the picture came into focus. She was meal prepping every Sunday. Chicken, rice, and spinach, cooked in large batches, portioned into containers, and reheated every day at lunch and sometimes at dinner. She was eating reheated versions of all three of those foods, often more than once a day, 5 or 6 days a week. She thought she was being disciplined. She was, but the chemistry of what she was eating was working against the discipline of her effort. We did not start with a prescription. We changed the preparation. Fresh cooked protein at meals when possible, or chicken eaten cold over salad. Rice replaced midweek with lentils and sweet potato, cooked fresh. Spinach moved almost entirely to raw in her lunches. Eggs cooked fresh each morning in under 5 minutes. Within 3 months, her inflammatory markers had dropped meaningfully. Her afternoon energy stabilized. And when I saw her at our follow-up 6 months later, she told me that she had started walking her neighbor's dog in the evenings because she finally had the energy for it after dinner. That is not a pharmaceutical outcome. That is kitchen chemistry, understood and acted on. The pattern Margaret changed is the same pattern this list describes. It is not about what you eat. It is about what happens to that food between the first time heat touches it and the moment it reaches your body. Here is your action plan for tonight. First, open your refrigerator and identify any cooked spinach. If it has been there since yesterday and you were planning to reheat it, eat it cold, or let it go, do not reheat it. Second, if you have leftover rice that is more than 1 day old, discard it. If it is fresh from last night, reheat it only once and bring it to a full temperature throughout before eating. Third, move chicken to a cold use protein. Plan 1 or 2 salads this week where cold sliced chicken is the protein, no reheating required. Fourth, commit to cooking eggs fresh. Set a timer for 4 minutes on your phone right now if you need a reminder that it does not take long. 4 minutes for a fresh egg versus the nutritional and chemical cost of a reheated one is not a trade worth making. Fifth, look at your weekly meal prep rhythm. The goal is not to abandon meal prep. The goal is to prep the components that hold up safely: roasted vegetables, raw greens, legumes, cooked in batches, and to cook the proteins that are most chemically sensitive fresh or close to it. These are not dramatic changes. They do not require a new kitchen or an expensive appliance or a special diet. They require understanding why the second application of heat matters, and then making the small adjustments that put that understanding into practice. Before you go, I want to ask you something directly. Write in the comments today and tell me which of these 4 foods surprised you most. Was it the spinach? Was it the eggs? Was it the rice you have been reheating your whole life? I want to know, because the next topics I cover are shaped by what this audience is actually wrestling with. And one more thing. There is another place your body hides its warnings. It is not in the food you eat, but in the signals your body sends before anything shows up on a standard blood panel. Those are the early markers that most 10-minute appointments never get to. That is the next video. Stay sharp, and I will see you there.